Hi, it's Jeff with Flow Software, and I want to build out a project today. This is a special request from one of our partners, Michael Dowdell over at Copar down in Monterrey, Mexico, has been asking me to do a sustainability project, and it'd be a great time to dive into that. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got my Flow config tool open. I haven't connected to a data source. I haven't built out any of the models yet. And I thought maybe I'd just walk you through what it would look like to go grab live data first if you're not currently historizing something like an energy tag. So let's get started with that. I have an option to be able to connect to a new data source by coming to my data tab, right-clicking on data source, and then browsing those available sources. Today, we are going to use OPC. I've got a Kepware OPC UA server installed on my machine, and we'll build out this connection. So let's take a look at that Kepware first. I've built out a little sim called filler 001. I've got my energy tag sitting there. All I need to do now is map to that tag my server information. It's just using my machine name, and I have security turned off. So we'll keep it super simple for the configuration. The purge age is going to determine how many days Flow is going to keep the raw data in flat file storage. I'm only going to use this for instances where I'm not actively historizing a tag somewhere else. So your scenario might be you don't have a historian, and you're not sure if you need to invest in a historian yet. So Flow gives you the capability to say, well, I need to keep raw data for, say, 90 days. And I'm doing this so that I can aggregate that data or analyze that data. It's not meant to be a long-term storage, but it's a great way to validate whether you want to invest in storing a tag based on being able to see that data before you make that decision. So in this case, I'm going to go 90 days. My server is my machine name, and port default 49320. I do not have security enabled. I'm not worried about my changing from my defaults, and my tag delimiter is a dot. All right, let's go ahead and deploy that data source. To deploy a data source, I open up my deployment tab. I'll drop it here on my platform. And typically from here, when you deploy a data source, you just come down and right-click and hit deploy. But for an OPC server, I need to tell it which tags I want it to actually historize. So I'll go to configure. Deploy it first and then configure it. And maybe if I'm a little patient and let it deploy. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to browse to my filler. And grab that energy tag. I'll turn my logging on, validate that, and I'm now good to go. All right, let's refresh. Now I can see that that energy tag has started to historize. Let's come into the last couple minutes. And I'm now starting to store the raw data for this tag. So just like that, I could connect to an OPC or an UA server, an MQTT broker, whether that's JSON or SparkPlug-B. Maybe I'm using Telegraph and I want to be able to buffer data from Telegraph or even a Kafka stream. This is just a nice way for you to be able to do that. from a licensing side, we don't charge you for tags that you want to historize or anything like that. So it does have its limitations. You're going to exceed its capabilities if you try to use it as a full-blown industrial historian. That's not the purpose. The purpose is for you to be able to say, hey, you know what? I need 30 days or 60 days or 90 days of raw data for this tag. And, you know, my Pi system, I'm at the top of my licensing. I don't want to spend whatever it is that they're asking me to spend to be able to add license to that. This is a great way to grab data that Flow's going to use. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the rest of our data sources for this demo. I'm going to use my Flow Juice Factory. Now, my Juice Factory has been kind of increased in my demo. We've gone from 1 or 2 lines to multiple lines, lots of fillers inside of each line. And my goal today is to understand my energy usage on each of these fillers. So let's take a quick look at the filler. And we can see that my filler has an energy tag. It's this JQ001. Here's JQ003. So each filler has this tag, and that's the tag that I'm going to use today. Let's start by coming into our model and building out our project. I have the function or the freedom to build out folder structure as how I would like. So I could follow an ISO 95 model. This is my site, and within my site, I've got my area. My area here is packaging. And now once I'm inside of packaging, I'm going to come down and this will be my filler 001, and we're doing energy. This metric is where my naming convention actually starts. So the uniqueness of any of the metrics, any of the measures, any of the events that I build will actually start here. This folder structure is for my own project organization. So within filler 001 energy, I'm going to go ahead and bring over my energy tag. So that is here. My default right now, when I drag something from this side of the namespace over to my model, my default will turn it into a tag. I could say by default I want to change it to a measure. And my default format is currently 3 decimal points. Let's change that and we'll go to 2. My unit of measure is not defaulted. This is kilowatt hours. Now if I leave it undefined, it will default to what's in my historian. But let's go ahead and define it. We drag this across. And I've inherited the description, the engineering unit, as well as the tag name from the historian in this case. I am going to go ahead and abstract that because I don't need that 110-JQ-001.pv. I want to use a very common sense name for my information model that I'm building. So we'll just call this my source. So let's look at this naming convention now. It's filler 001 energy dot source. If I wanted, I could change the format here. I could break this with a period. Maybe I'm using underscores. Now when I look at this, I would address this as filler underscore 001 dot energy dot source. This could be helpful if I'm also going to have something, another metric maybe in this area that would be production or maintenance. All right, let's continue. When I open up that source tag, which is now open here in on my workbench, you'll see that the description, as I said, carried over from the historian. My format is as I defaulted it. My unit of measure is coded. I'm looking at the data preview. I'm able to see what the data looks like. This is an engineering tool for me to understand the data before I try to use it. And this looks like a totalizer. There are currently no model attributes associated with this tag. And the retrieval section is telling me it's coming from this historian and that is the path to the tag within that historian. All right. Before I do anything else, my goal over this is to do 2 things. I want to understand how much energy I'm using per product that I'm producing. I also want to understand how much energy I'm using per day for all of my equipment. So I'm going to do 2 different things. I'm going to build this once. I'm going to build it just for this filler. And I'm going to do that by having an event defined that tells me when I'm running and what product I'm making. So I want to basically understand what my state is of the equipment, and I want to understand what product I'm running through my equipment. Once I've done that, then I'm going to create a measure that tells me how much I'm making per day of everything, all product, and I'm also going to categorize that by product as well. So to do that, I need to create an event. I need to bring in a tag that tells me what my state is and trigger that event based on that state. I need to bring in context around what is the product that I'm making, and then I'll be ready to take this energy tag, aggregate it, and slice it by all of those different variables. Now, once I'm done that, I'm also then going to take the work that I've done, create a template from it, and then deploy the template for all of my fillers. So this video will be longer than necessary because I'm going to templatize everything. I'm going to teach as I'm doing it. If I was just doing this as a Flow user who's been certified on their core Flow coursework, this project would take me about 20 minutes, and then based on any visualization I'd want to build later. And actually, you know what? We'll add some visualization to the backside of the project as well. Okay, that's what we're going to do. Now, to get started, the next thing I need here is to go ahead and create my event. So this will be my filler 001 state. Let's bring this state tag over, call it my source, and now let's look at this data. If you've seen any of our other videos using this data, this is going to look familiar to you. Our state tag represents an integer value of 0 when it's idle, 10 during our setup, 20 when we're running. You'll see scheduled and unscheduled downtimes between a value of 21 and 25. And then when I go into CIP, I'm in a value of 30 before it resets. All right, so I think I might actually go ahead and just add another little layer of complexity for this. I'm going to create two different events. I'm going to create an event that tells me that I'm either in setup or running. And then I'm also going to create an event that says I'm in CIP. And I want to do that because I want later on to be able to understand how much energy I'm using, say, in a specific part of my process like CIP. So let's call this event, we'll call this our running event. And then I'm going to bring in another one that's going to be filler 001.cip. Perfect. And let's go ahead and define with a calculated tag. So I took the source tag and drug it down onto the calculator in the flow zone. And that allows me to now say this is my CIP trigger. I'm going to bring that down here. Let's do this one as our running trigger. And now we'll just define this. So when I'm running in this, by definition, that was when I am in either a state. I'm going to count my startup, my changeover. I'm going to count that as running. So that means that if I have a value that is greater than or equal to 10, and a value that is less than 30, in that case I'm running, otherwise I'm not. So that becomes my trigger. A value of 1 is what I will actually trigger this running event off of now. This was C#, and with that statement I just need to validate it. Now let's take a look at the trigger tag. Let's pop it out. I'm going to bring the source over top of it, and you can see I have a value of 1 when I'm in this state 20. Goes back to 0 at CIP, stays at 0 through idle, comes back to a 1 value when I'm in a changeover state. All right, so that trigger's ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on that CIP. This one's even easier. It's just when it's a value of 30. Else 0. There we are. That's my CIP. Again, I can just verify that. There's that value of 30. There's my value of 1. All right, so both of these events are ready for me to move forward with them now. I'm going to go ahead and just move this tag down. We'll associate it with energy there. You know, that's actually a good teaching moment. You just watched me drag this. Well, you just watched me do two things, really. I changed the name of this tag, and I changed the parent it's associated with. So it was, I think I had it under, maybe it was under the CIP or the running. Either way, it doesn't really matter. I left that association to that event from the hierarchy and brought it down to energy just for my own organization, and changed the name. So I would think that I just broke that calculated tag. Actually, I did not. And the reason we don't break when we do that is that if I look at this state tag, you're going to see that the state tag is not being referenced by its name or by its path. It's actually always being referenced by a unique ID number that Flow has assigned it, in this case 5049. And everything I create in Flow gets its own unique ID. So that running trigger tag is 5051. Even the event itself has its own ID, 1142. And the reason we do that is so that as you're moving and renaming things in Flow, we are not using the name or the path in order to reference it. It allows us to be able to really keep those dependencies in a much easier way. Okay, let's bring in one more tag that I'm going to want. I'm going to bring this product tag over. This product tag is telling me what we are making at the time. So another integer value, and I'm getting a 1 or a 0 or a 2, a 3, a 4, 5, and so on. Maybe you have that already programmed at the PLC level, maybe not. Maybe it's in a SQL database and you need to reach out to the SQL database to grab that piece of information. It's not a problem. We connect to real-time data sources, historians, all of the different flavors of SQL. So that means if you're MES or you have an ERP system that has that information in it, we can grab that data from those systems. Usually the difficult part when you do that is your timestamps from your historian are never going to line up with the data and the timestamps inside of your SQL database. We actually, when we connect to these databases, we're helping normalize time so that when we want to cross-reference historian tags or real-time data tags and data that's in SQL, there's always a timestamp alignment. So we actually carry those timestamps from the SQL data. Whenever it changes, we assign a new timestamp and carry that value down when we compare it to historical data. Really makes it easy to work with the data when we're basically presenting it in that standard historian tag format to your users. So in this demo, I've made it easy on myself. I've got the product tag sitting at the PLC. The reality is you might not have that. If that's the case, it's just a matter of creating another data source, picking where that is actually living, connecting to that database. Here I've already got one connected. In this case, it's a Microsoft SQL. I think I'm actually using SQL Express on this one. And we have gone ahead and, yeah, it is SQL Express. We've connected to this table. And then we've created a definition file for this. We can get into that on another video, but because we've defined how we want to read data from this table, that means that I could just look now through and browse this SQL table like it's a tag historian almost. So I could come down to annealing, look at line 1 and say, oh, okay, so this is my role ID, and that tells me, maybe the role ID tells me what product we were making at the time, or the lot number, or the lot ID tells me that. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll clear out all of our windows, and let's go ahead and take a look now at these events. I've got my product tag in, integer values, we understand that. Let's go ahead and define our actual event for when we're running. So this is now, this is my setup and running. Don't need to worry about my minimum duration or my maximum duration. I am going to choose to backfill everything to the 10th of March. So let's go ahead and say, what is our start trigger? We've already defined it in this tag, so I'll drag the tag into this window. And by default, it's when the condition becomes true. And that's what I want for this. Notice I could also start an event based on stale data or every time a value changes. But for me, at a value of 1 is how we start. And we define our stop when it comes to a value of 0. So that's my running. I do want to capture what product we're making. So I will open up the events. I will right click and I will do a new attribute. I'm going to retrieve this from the tag of product that I've already brought over. If I didn't have it anywhere in another database, I don't have it in a SQL table, I don't have it at the PLC as a tag, I could have an operator provide that information to me on a web form. And so if I did manually entered, then I would use Flow to build a web form or to trigger anytime this event starts, to trigger an entry for my operator on a web form that I could embed in another application that might already be on their iPad or be there on the HMI. In this case, I'm retrieving it. This is my product type. And I need to associate data to this. It's actually, if I hover it over, it's telling me I need to define that. So I'll just drag that tag onto product. There we go. I'm going to get back a value of a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. You might have seen before in other videos, I've shown that I can build an enumeration. So I don't want to get just a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5 back. In fact, I'd prefer to see data that correlates. So here I've created a list that says, hey, if it's a 1, it's grape. If it's a 2, it's cherry. That's well documented. We won't go through that today. So let's bring in that product. And now this event is ready for me to deploy. So I've defined it at this point. I've set the rules around this event. That is getting written into Flow's backend. So we run 2 different tables in Flow's database. You don't have to build that database. Flow does it automatically when you install. We use Microsoft for our backend, but we run 2 different tables. One is my configuration table. So everything I've been doing right now, from building the model, associating tags, defining these rules, building new calculations, creating the event rules, that is all getting stored inside of the configuration table. When I deploy, that tells Flow's calculation engine now to come back and backfill this data to look at the associated data, the history of it for the previous 2 weeks, grab all of that raw data from the source, look through it, see if these rules are true, and if they are, then start to write the results of this event to Flow's second table. That's our storage table for all of the KPI measures, as well as for all of the events that get defined. So with a little bit of patience now, that should be about done, and it is. And so now I have an event indicated by the true value, and then the end of the event. Oh, break until the next event, and so on. And that's showing me for the past 5 days. When I look down here at the product type, I'll see that for each of these event periods, so here's March 15th to March 16th, start time, stop time, I can see that in this case, I made product orange juice. And then the next event made product cherry, and so on. So that is now my running event. I'm going to do the exact same thing for my CIP event. This is CIP is my description, and I'm just going to bring both of these over. That's a value of 1. And then for my attribute, right click, same exact thing. This is my product type. And we'll associate the product with it. Enumeration was product, and I'm good to backfill. Okay, that's backfilling. Now I'll have my CIP, and I'll know what product we had just finished when we're in this CIP mode. Okay, now I might not want to have both of these events broken out individually. I might also just want to understand a filler 001, and this is a batch. And a batch is consisting of the running, the setup, the running, and the CIP. So in this case, I'm not going to define a batch event as the idle time. So let's look at this definition. My trigger, I don't have a tag for this, but I've got an event. So I'm going to trigger the start of a batch based on my running event starting. And I'm going to trigger the end of this based on my CIP ending. Same thing, let's add an attribute. And we'll run that enumeration. So now I will have a master event called batch. Batch starts when my running event starts, and it stops when my CIP event has ended. Let's see if it's already done. And it is. And then if we compare, maybe we'll come in a little closer on time. Let's look at the previous 2 days. If I bring in my running definition, let's make you something that's super bright. And then let's bring in our CIP definition. So we can see the CIP extends this event to here. The next running starts here and extends. And you can see how now my master event of batch covers that. Okay, so I've defined what I'm making. I've actually defined the different process steps of making that. Now let's go ahead and get ready to understand the amount of energy that we're using. So remember, for my energy, I've got this state tag. Oh, sorry, not state, source tag. I've got my source tag, and it's a totalizer. So it's just going up and to the right, constantly gaining. It's in kilowatt hours. I want to know every hour how much energy am I using. So I'm going to start by taking this source tag, dragging it over to the hourly measure. Give it a 1 hour total. And then when I open up that 1 hour total, there's 2 things I need to pay attention to. First is the context. This is my time context. How do I know what an hour is? Now that's pretty easy for an hour, right? An hour starts at the top of the hour and extends 60 minutes until the beginning of the next hour. But what if instead of an hour I had said, make this a shiftly measure, or a daily measure, or a weekly measure? What's the definition of a shift, a day, a week, maybe even a quarter or a year in your organization? Well, most production facilities don't start their day at midnight. Most production facilities start their day at the beginning of first shift. And what is a shift? It might be 8 hours, it might be 12 hours, it might be a different type of flexible shift that changes. Maybe it changes on 2-week rotations, maybe it changes seasonally. Maybe it's different on Saturday and Sunday than it is Monday through Friday. So with Flow, we start by defining our calendar periods. So here is a production calendar, which is being referenced in the context window. It's always going to be production because production is my default. That's why it's bolded. And the definition of production right now is that my year starts in January, my week starts on Sunday, my day starts at 6 a.m. Within production is a shift calendar. Starting on 2018, beginning of the year, my shift was defined as 6 a.m. is morning shift, 2 o'clock is afternoon shift, and then at 10 o'clock begins the night shift, and that runs Sunday through Saturday. I could begin a new shift maybe next week, so I'd enter this in just like this shift was entered in. But when you see time in Flow referenced, know that it's always calendar based or it is event based. So to make something event based, I simply need to add it to the context. So I want to know every hour what I've been doing in energy usage, but I also want to understand every hour what has it looked like for how much energy have I used during my total batch. So I'll drag the batch period over. I want to bring in with that context around the product. I'd like to know also what have I used in running. I'll bring that context in. And I'd like to know what am I using for CIP. And you guessed it, I'll bring that context in also. Okay, so now when I come down here and say, hey, I want you to look at this energy tag, I want you to perform an aggregate on that raw data, and I want it for the hour, and I want to know within that hour, if I had a batch, how much energy did I use during that particular batch, and how much energy did I use particularly in the running set stage and in the CIP stage, and give me context of the product type when you do that. Now, the issue is I have to know the right aggregate to use. I've got a lot of aggregates I could choose from. For me, I'm going to use the counter aggregate. That is a specific aggregate that we've built for a totalizer. This allows me to not have to worry about having to hard code the rollover stage of the totalizer or understand when it resets, because my aggregation method of counter is going to look at the data, and if it drops from one value to the next, it understands that there's been a reset period. So if it's 5, 6, 7, and then all of a sudden 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0, every time it drops from 7 to 0, it will understand that and then to add the next step to the original number. Okay, so I've got counter selected, I've got my context here. We're backfilling to March the 10th. All I need to do now is hit deploy, and Flow's engine will go grab all of the raw data for this source tag from the historian for the previous hour, and the previous hour, and the previous hour, and the previous hour, the whole way back to March 10th at midnight. It will run the aggregation of that raw data to understand how much energy did I use in this hour, and then it will further filter that data based on the event periods within that hour. While that's happening, I'm also going to say, take this hour, and I want to know what is my shift to date. So all I did was drop the hour back on itself, and it said, I'm going to use the hourly blocks that are being written to Flow's database, and I'm now going to aggregate those hourly blocks by the shift period, and the shift period as it's defined inside of my calendar. I'm also going to carry over all of the other event context as it was defined in this measure. Now, how do you want me to handle the aggregated periods of time inside of that shift? Do we want to know what the average amount of hourly energy was? The min, the max, the delta? No, we want the sum in this case. So beyond just shiftly, I'm also going to tell it to give me a date. I'm going to take those hours and get a shift total. We'll nest that under the source. I'm going to take these hours and get a daily total. And I'm going to take the daily, get a week to date, get a month to date, and a monthly total. So just like that, I've taken this baseline of data, my hourly, and I've now asked it to calculate all of these other KPIs as well. The orange disk tells me I haven't deployed all of this. So all I need to do now is right click at the top level, hit deploy, and Flow's calculation engine is now going to see that all of these other KPIs get backfilled back to March the 10th. Because I don't have a full month, I won't have a monthly total in this exercise. I just wanted you to see how you actually do that. Okay. Next piece for me is to understand what I would want to do from a visualization standpoint, or where I want to send this data to visualize it on a platform other than Flow. So as an example, if I am interested in sharing this daily total, let's go ahead and see if it's done calculating. And it is. So popping it out, looking at the data table, I have my daily total. So every day I've got a new total, and that total is the total kilowatt hours that I used per day. But I also have, if I look at this table, kilowatt hours I used for the day of the 18th, but I also have what I used in my product types. So if I look at my batch or my running or my CIP, I've also got all of that data sitting here. So when I have my cherry, my grape, so here was my grape on the 18th, I used 2.36 kilowatt hours in making grape for my CIP, and I used 62.20 kilowatt hours while we were running, and so my total energy usage based on grape was 64.56 kilowatt hours. That was for the day. So now when I take this information and I want to send it somewhere else, maybe I'm using a UNS approach. So I want to have a unified namespace where anything I calculate, I send back to the UNS. I would come to my data, not a source, but consumer. I would build out, maybe it's an MQTT broker, Sparkplug, or JSON. I would build that out. I think I've got one just sitting here already. I don't, so let's just make one for demo purpose. I would deploy that, and then I would integrate it. So I would say, hey, here's my MQTT broker. It's been deployed. Now take that total running number. In this case, it would be grape at 64.56. And at the end of each day, when that number gets calculated, I want you to share that information to this broker. It will default it with this path. I can come in here and I can say, hey, when you do this, I want you to change the path, and I can define the path here. I don't know if you noticed, but I set my, if I was using Sparkplug, I would actually come in and set my group and device and node namespace here, and then that would be inherited from each of the measures or events that I'm publishing. So if it was site/packaging/filler001, for instance, then the rest of my namespace would carry over from that. Okay, so that's how I integrate it into other systems. And this could be a SQL database. It could be sending it to Snowflake or a Kafka stream, really anywhere that I want on a schedule or on a trigger to send this information. Now for our intents and purposes, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to show you how you put this on a dashboard. All right, so let's go to our charts. We'll create a new folder. This is my sustainability. And within sustainability, let's create a new, we'll just stay super simple here, chart, and we'll do a table. So I'm going to just build a data table. My data table is going to show me the value or the amount of kilowatt hours per product per day. So I'm going to come down to my daily. This will be my energy by product daily. Let's open this up. I've got 3 tabs. My general tab lets me select the amount of time that I'm going to show. So let's show the previous 7 days, and we'll go to the current value. And then within my headers, I'm going to add a header, or no, actually I think I'll remove the limits. We're not going to get into limits right now. We'll keep the context. Looks good. Now let's bring over this daily measure. You can see that I inherit the name of both the folder, or in this case the metric, as well as the measure. So I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. Now I've got a lot of context associated with this measure. I'm going to choose which context or which attribute I'd like to display here. So I could create a series of these. So let's start with the running. Okay, so that's my running. Now let's bring it back in. So this one will be our energy used daily. This will be our energy, and we'll say this is our setup and run. This context will be setup and run, which is our running product type. And then this one will be our energy used by CIP. So let's add that context. Perfect. I don't think I'll do anything else just yet. So let's first take a look at it, and then we'll come back and we'll make a few changes on the formatting. I right-click on the table and just go to Open. That's going to launch another browser window for me. And just like that, I've got all of that data that's inside of Flow displayed on a HTML5 web page that I can embed inside of another document. So let's take a look at this. What did we do? We've got our energy used daily. So this is the total energy that I used by product each day. So what I haven't done here is I have yet to do an actual total energy overall. So when we come back in, I'm going to maybe add a total energy across the top. Unit of measure, it's in kilowatt hours. I can see that on Monday, March the 11th. I have not made any cherry or cranberry product. I've made grape and orange juice, and there's the total amount of energy that I used for each of those. It's also showing me the total amount of energy that I used during setup and run, and the energy that I used during CIP for each of those days. Notice that the next day I've used 7.34 kilowatt hours for cherry, for cranberry, and for orange juice. And there I'm seeing the breakdown of those, and so on and so forth. So if I was going to change this at all, I think what I would do is, as I mentioned, I would come in, I would add this one more time. This is now going to be my total. I'm going to move it up. I want it to be first. Also going to bold it. And I don't need any context on this one. So now when I come back in, I now have my total kilowatt hours per day for this filler, and then the breakdown of how I got there based on the product that I was making. And if I wanted, I could come over here and I could build in maybe a week to date or a month to date calculation. So I'll just do it for this top one. So I would come into my headers and I would say, hey, let's add a, we'll do a to date extension monthly. So this gives me the capability now to come in here and say, hey, there's a detail I want to add. It's a monthly detail, and I need to know what is that daily month to date. Like I said, I'll only do it for this first one. We will bold that as well. But now I've picked up month to date, total energy usage. I could do the exact same thing for my products. Maybe I'll do it just quickly and show you for here as well. There we go. So now I've got total energy used for each product for the entire set of batches, month to date. Just like that. All right. I think I'll probably go ahead and, let's stop this video, and then I will do a separate video on how to take the work that we've just done and create a template from it. In that video, what you'll see me do is, by taking this and templatizing it, I'll then, in just a couple of minutes, be able to deploy this to all of the other fillers that are on lines 2, 3, and 4. So, I've done the work now. I've prepared my model. I know what I want. Now, how fast can I scale it to 5 fillers or 50 fillers? Spoiler alert, it only takes a couple of minutes once I've got that template made. So thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. Again, hey, Michael, thank you for your patience and for your idea of this video. Hope everybody has a great one.